Recording. Hey guys, it's Ashley with Wholesaling Out of the Box here with Shawn, Jacob, and Cam. And today what we're going to do is a little bit different than what you normally hear from us. We're going to go over the book Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business by Gino Wickman. And I think I'm the only one with a hard copy here. Everyone else listened to audiobook. But what we're going to do is go through it sort of chapter by chapter. And you guys are going to get releases on the podcast and on YouTube. Every week for the next few weeks, we'll break it down into a chapter or two, depending on how long each discussion goes. And then you guys can kind of see what we think of the book, as well as how it relates to our business. Yeah, that's about it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the discussion and keep coming back for more. Shawn, you're
cool. All right. So guys, this is super, I don't want to say informal, but it's we as a company operating in what this book Traction is about. So this is a book, which literally is its title, right? Getting traction under your wheels. So you're not spinning your wheels, you're understanding why and where to go. So the fundamentals is the most important part about how to build your company. And that's what this book talks to. So as you're getting into wholesaling, you're coming into this group, you're learning the systems, the processes, the wheres, the whys, the hows, and the whos. So this is what we're talking about here today. And this book is really good. So you guys that are in the group and join the group are now, you should have access to these books, audios. We're going to get that to you. And then you should be, these are thin books, guys. You should be less than like a week or two and you're done with them. Our group has listened to them. We're going over them in this audio with you guys or this video, and talking to them. So, one of the things, the first part of this was just the introduction of the book. It says, this book is not another silver bullet magic book, or flavor of the month strategy. It's based on real world experiences, practical wisdom, timeless truth. More importantly, it works. Through hands-on experience, this guy, Gino, has developed a practical but thorough method to help strengthen and re-energize your business or your company. So I'm looking at, this is just, and we can share this with you guys, and hopefully you guys have it or I can send it over to you, but it's just a recap of Traction. So it's like a Cliff Notes version where it just goes through it. And the first part of this is these 5 principles. Lack of control, people, profit, the ceiling, and nothing works. So that's the introduction of where this thing's going. The first chapter is the EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And there's about 6 pieces of that, which is vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. So that's the first one we're going to discuss today, and let the guys in the group discuss what they felt, what they saw, what they're looking for, and what they want to do with it, and let you guys kind of go from there. So who wants to start with anybody starts with what the EOS that they feel like identifying the 6 components of the organization? Cam, you want to start it?
Yeah, I would start with the vision. So you have to have a sight, right? You have to have something you're working toward. And you have to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And, when somebody first told me that, even before I read the book, I thought it was kind of fluffy, kind of hippity dippity, whatever you want to say, right? Like, I have to know where I'm going. Well, I already know where I'm going, but actually defining that and writing that out, what you're looking to do, who you're looking to help, how you're looking to structure it, right? And what your ultimate goal is. And that's what resonated with me a lot. And the EOS was the vision. And within our company, the vision is really clear and we're all on the same page.
Okay. Awesome. Jacob.
Yeah, I would actually pretty much mirror what Cam just said, right? And what that looks like for us is we hold our weekly meetings, right? And this is obviously all stuff that is going to come up later in the book, of course, but we have the accountability and we have the roadmap, so to speak, that identifies ultimately what the company goals are. And then we, of course, put actions in place to go out and achieve those goals. And to mirror what Cam said, it's extremely important to have that stuff written down so that everybody in the company can understand it and really more importantly, so that everybody in the company is on the same page, because it's so easy in this business, and we all know it, so easy in this business to get shiny object syndrome and to kind of get caught up in the day to day and kind of like lose sight of what the original plan was. So when you have that written down and you can go back and address it, I just think it's extremely important in helping you stay on track and really helping you grow to where you want to be.
Cool.
So
Ashley?
extremely important component.
Yeah, well, and at one point on page 4 in this book, Gino Wickman says, the sun provides the earth with billions of kilowatts of energy, yet if you stand in it for an hour, the worst you will get is a little sunburn. On the other hand, a few watts of energy focused in one direction is all a laser beam needs to cut through diamonds. So I think that really sums up what you're doing here, or what we need to be doing with vision. Is, you know, we can be that sun and we can give someone a sunburn, or we can cut through diamonds and really decide what we're going to focus on, where we're going to be. And something that I thought about a lot was the 4 kind of components of our business and how we need to be able to focus on those 4 things right now and decide. And I mean, one of them is like sort of being built in the process, but to really get a handle on what that looks like. And I actually think some of the conversations we had this morning make that even more clear, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Cool. All right. So big vision picture is for the company. We've always talked about it. Was the goal was to get $500,000 in gross sales. So if we reverse engineer that number, we've come up to that number monthly needs to be $41,000. So first big vision is the company as a whole trying to reach that goal. Now, as we're discussing this today and people that are listening to us, like, we are damn near close to obtaining that goal, right?
Yeah,
We're at 250, 245-ish.
Yeah, just to give you guys a little bit of information and background on that is, I started working with Shawn back in January of 2018. And that's when he started kind of implementing a lot of the things that he got from this book, Traction. And you can see that in how we run our business. And it's something that I don't even know to be any different, because he did such a good job of like, this is how he taught me. And that was one of the first things he did, was said, our yearly goal is going to be $500,000. And I was like, okay. And he had no data to back that up from previous years, no tracking, that kind of thing. So we've really been tracking to see what that looks like moving forward. And we didn't hit it in 2018. We didn't hit it in 2019. We're not even close. And then this year, as of recording, it's July 3rd, and I pulled the second quarter's numbers. We're at 243,000 gross, which means we're right at that halfway mark. We need to push a little bit harder. But I'm just really proud of us, because if you're listening to this in the future, 2020 has been something, to say the least.
During the coronavirus, we're having our best year. So, like, I don't want to hear any excuses from anybody talking about you can't do this business. If you can focus your numbers and your team is focused on what they're doing, they have a goal, it's attainable. You know what I mean? Like, it's only excuses. So first big vision goal was $500,000 in gross sales. And again, guys, I'll say this, our company knows this, but like, gross is for show, and we like, net is for dough. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. Gross is cool, but what do you got to expend to get there in order to put and keep in your pocket? That's more important. So goal, we're getting closer to it. Then reverse engineering that into the monthly, into the weekly, into the daily. And that's where we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of this. And this gets back to the vision, which we're going to talk about, and getting into the rocks, but I don't want to step out too far of that yet. So people. So we got the vision we're talking about, and we're going to deep dive that a little bit more. People, successful leaders around themselves with great people. You can't build a great company without help. Be truly honest to yourself. Are all people the right ones for the job? That's going to be a hell no. The reality is that some probably are hurting you more than helping you. So that is a really good representation of where I wanted to go and where we are going. So it's the right ass in the right seat. and everybody, and we always say this in our company, everybody stays in their lane and doesn't like jump out of it. And if they do, they get smacked and put back in their lane, right? So like, that's awesome, because people can't do what they need to do if you're trying to like push or get in their way or do something that you think is you can do better than them. Like, if you hire that person to do a role, let them do it, let them grow it, and let them screw it up and figure it out. That is important. But make sure you give them a foundation to start with. So it's, hey, we need acquisitions. Here's the SOP or the standard operating procedure for that. Here is at dispositions. Here's the role in the process for that. On Ashley's side, from closing coordination to buttons and systems and processes in your CRM, like all of this is what I mean by staying in your lane or having the right ass in the right seat. So what do you guys think about that as far as the people version of the second portion of this EOS system? Cam, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's right. So have the right people in the right seats. And it's funny because Shawn said that for a long time, and I didn't realize it was from the book until we started reviewing the book. And it's 100% crucial, right? If you are somebody that needs to be on the phone, then you need to be able to be a personable person, right? And somebody can identify with just through the phone call. So I would say, and definitely as we're talking to guys and gals who are coming up, one person in the seat, right? They don't have a company yet. They have a company, right? But they're a one-man show or one lady show, right? You got to figure out what you're not so good at, right? And so if you're not so good at data mining, and that's not so, the best use of your time, or if you're not so good at calling, you have to figure out what, you might not be the right person for that seat, right? And you got to find somebody else that can help you with that. Maybe that's a virtual assistant or whatever. But you got to get out of your own way. So that's how I saw that. And when I first read this book, like a year ago, I was still a one-man band. And that was what I was trying to get to was how do I delegate things out to somebody else? How do I get somebody else to help me to do the things that I'm not so good at? So 100%.
Awesome. Jacob?
Yeah, I think going off of what Cam just said about delegating, I mean, that's something that is extremely difficult that not everybody, I think, learns right away. So it's one of those things where you almost have to, like me, I'll speak to me because I'm, in the acquisitions roles, right? So with that being said, like we all come up with different ideas. We all have things that we think would be great to implement and so on. But then it's a question of like, is that really important to what my role is, right? So being able to identify that quickly so that it doesn't drag you down and bog down what you're actually supposed to be doing on a daily basis or a weekly basis, that's extremely important. And that can be really, really difficult to do initially. So seeing that, like I can speak to that personally with everything that I've taken on, of course, over the last few months. It's been very difficult to try to get things off of my plate. And I'm not always the best at asking for help and so on. So I think that trying to internalize that and really trying to understand your specific role within the company is very important when you're first starting off, because it's ultimately going to allow you to identify what your strengths are, what you should be focusing on. And then it also tells you, like, especially when you're a one-man show, like Cam just said, it tells you what you have to start delegating out to other people. So is that to a virtual assistant? Is it hiring somebody else on within the company to take on a lead role? Those are all those types of important questions. And then as that person comes into that lead role, then it goes back to what we just talked about, right? Is that the right person and are they in the right seat? And you have to start asking questions as the manager, as the owner of the company, in your case, whether or not that's a good fit for that role. So, and extremely important, right? Because you want to be able to empower that person, like you said, to grow their individual position so that eventually they can go on and do the same. So you have to have that trust, you have to have that relationship. And that's why it's so important to vet people and to allow them to grow and really, kind of see whether or not it's a good fit. So extremely important.
Awesome. Elevate and delegate.
That's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is you have to really be honest with yourself too, because I am definitely not the best at delegating. I'm getting better, but deciding what is the best use of my time, and sometimes a little bit of what do I not like to do so that I don't have to dread doing it and it gets pushed off for a day or a week until eventually I'm like, oh, I have to do it, so I'll do it. But I mean, it happens. It happens
No,
to
it's
the best
real.
of
I'm
us.
laughing because it's real. These
Yeah.
are real feelings, guys. This is like everyday normal shit. Like it's okay. But knowing, like you said, knowing what you're good at, not good at, and then delegating. That's
Yeah.
massive.
And I think that's super important, especially if you want to move on to be a business owner and not just a one-man show, because you might see your role as one thing in the business and you come to realize that you're not that role. Not everyone is made to be a business owner. And maybe you're the visionary, maybe you're the integrator, as you'll see later in the book, but you just need to be honest with yourself and really take that time uh, to reflect and decide what is going to be best moving forward, and not just for you, but for the company as a whole. Because sometimes it might be better if you don't delegate these things, but for the company, it is going to be better.
Yeah, so that's a massive piece, guys. I can tell you right now, as a business owner at Full Circle, I've learned where to get out of the way, right? I have, and I'm still learning and getting better at it. But guys, we joke about this all the time, right? Like we'll have a message going back and forth, being like, "Oh, somebody crossed lanes. Yep, get back over in your lane." Like it's real because you feel as though that's what you should do, but really, you're your own roadblock, right? You're your own monkey wrench.
I
People
think
talk about like they're putting fires out. What? Because you're an arsonist? You're the one that started it. Like you didn't need to start any shit. So therefore, if you didn't do it, it wouldn't be a fire.
yeah. There have been a couple times lately where, for example, Cam has recently moved into the dispositions role, recently being in like the last 4 to 6 weeks. And Shawn and I have been training him on that and what that looks like. And Shawn has taken a step back. So Cam and I are working a lot closer about doing different things in the dispo role. And there have been a couple times in meetings where Shawn is like, well, what if you do this? And Cam and I are just kind of like, no, that's not how this works. And we have to sort of push him back and be like, no, please, you have not been in these like 4-hour conversations we've had where we've gone over why we need to be doing this.
Yep. So again, elevate, delegate with the right people in the right seats and recognize, know where you should be and not be. So that's really good. I'm glad that all you guys are able to see that and recognize it.
Shawn, one more thing on that.
Yeah.
I think that that's like going back to tying that into the vision, right? So I think that this is why the vision is so important, because ultimately when you start to identify where you're going, right, then you're eventually going to create the roadmap of how to get there. Once you do that, you're going to start to understand who you're going to need in certain seats and what those positions are and what they look like. So seeing all of that and then tying it back into right people in the right seats. So just tying it back into the vision statement, that's why it's so incredibly important that you do that prior to setting all this up.
So this would be what we call mind mapping, right? And this is mapping out what you want your business to look like, which in the book is talked about that. So there's a chapter that talks about how to put that together and what you're doing and why. And like, that's the vision part of this. So it's almost like a reverse when you come back and talk about it at the chapter 1, but you're like, oh shit, that's what he's talking about. Oh, okay. I got it. You know, it's funny because I had that realization when I was reading it the first time. I was like, oh yeah, the vision. Yeah. I should be able to pretty much map this out. And guys, if I've ever, and even the company guys have seen this, but I'll draw maps all the time. Like, okay, if we go here, we go there, we go here. And it's just like chicken scratch everywhere, right? But it's allowing your brain to think what's happening. That's just a normal process. Okay. All right. Next piece, data. The best leaders rely on a handful of metrics to help manage their business. The data component frees you from the quagmire of managing personalities, egos, subjective issues, emotions, intangibles by teaching you which metrics to focus on. So if anybody is ever around me long enough, they always know the same acronym I use all the time in the one statement, KPIs, and it's data, not drama. That is one of the biggest focus points of us as a company. And hopefully guys that are listening to this or companies that are learning to grow, this is the most important piece, I feel, because all the rest of it is, yes, it does matter a small amount, but at the end of the day, I don't care about the drama part. I care what the number says. How does the number show where we're growing or where we're losing in order to try to get where we're going? And ultimately, you will see that as a business owner, and even as an issue where maybe you're just acquisitions or dispositions, or you're in Ashley's role in taking care of things in the back end. It only matters what the data says, right? So focus on that. And that's something I feel like a lot of you guys can speak to. What do you think, Cam?
Real quick, Shawn, what does KPI stand for?
Oh yeah. Key performance indicator. I keep forgetting that because we talk about it all the time. It's all like, yeah, your mom, you said somebody said that the other day.
Oh yeah.
Like,
My mom listens to the podcast. Thanks, Mom. And she was like, I don't understand some of the acronyms. I think you guys need to say them. And I was like, good feedback. So we're going to try anytime we use an acronym to say what it is.
So KPI stands for key performance indicator. Cam, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so data is just, it's crazy to me. I love it, but it's crazy to me because, for instance, I'll give 2 examples. We were looking through the data of our current marketing streams, right? Our current marketing campaigns and where they come from, the source. And Ashley put up the numbers of the last years and where all the deals came from, where all the money came from, like what source they came from. And I was pretty surprised by that, but it speaks to exactly, hey, maybe we should shift something we're doing because the numbers aren't there, right? We're actually getting more money from these campaigns, so maybe we should focus more on those. And the other ones, as you know, I moved into the disposition role currently. I wanted to track all the data of where my time was being spent because now I got this new piece that's coming on, and I need to balance a couple pieces and need to look at the data. And I felt like I was looking at those numbers with Ashley a few weeks ago, and I felt like this is what I felt, but it doesn't matter what I felt. I felt like I was spending my time doing a bunch of research and a bunch of systems work, right? But you go to pull those numbers up, no, and most of my time was on the phone where it needed to be. And I was just blown away by that. But that's the data. You got to look back at the data and not how you feel. You want to obviously target your efforts and where you're spending money in your business and your operations by numbers, because emotions, they're just too subjective. So that's what resonates with me there. And I mean, we see it every day, if not every week, but pretty much daily as we're tracking numbers. So
awesome. Jacob?
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this topic because I feel like it actually resonated with me significantly more over the last couple of months now, not only in the real estate world, but oddly enough in my normal sales job as well. But what I love most about this chapter, and it resonates with me so well, is they say that everybody in the company has a number, right? Whatever that is. Like, so my number, and what I mean by that, it's a goal, right? So it's the one goal that you have to do week in and week out, and it is the single most important piece of your particular position. So for me in acquisitions, that number is 75. And what I mean by that is 75 points, right? We created our incentive program to basically, long story short, it's a point system, and it's based on the number of calls that you make and the number of texts that you put out on a weekly basis. So it's the only thing you have to focus on. So it's awesome because it's one of those things where I don't have to sit here and think about a million things. I have to think about one thing, and that one thing is 75 points. So it's the only goal on a weekly basis that needs to happen. And the reason that we know that, and this goes back to so much more, we know that the number has to be 75 because we know that we have to make 300 calls in order to get a contract, right? In order to actually sign a deal. So then it's reverse engineering into the number to try to figure out, okay, so if we want to do one deal a month, then I got to make a total of 300 calls a month. So what does it look like in order to make that happen? How much time is going to be allotted to doing that particular activity? For me, it's roughly 8 to 10 hours on a weekly basis. So I've got to find a way to create 8 to 10 hours in my schedule to hit the minimum number of calls, because we know that if we make the calls, that's going to lead to appointments. The more appointments you go on, the more likely you're going to get a contract, right? And these are vetted appointments on top of that. So, and that's something that you grow into and you learn. So I just love the idea that what they talk about in this particular chapter, what really caught me was just everybody has a number. So for acquisitions, it's 75, and it just takes all of the craziness throughout your day out of the equation because it's just a singular focal point. And the cool thing for that is that I just recently I just recently, over the last week, learned what my number is for my day job too. So the number there is 20, and that's 20 customer visits, because we know that if I go and see customers, I'm going to walk out with quotes. So there's always, obviously, there's a handful of numbers that follow that, and they all kind of run together, but that's it, right? If I go and see customers, I'm going to get quotes. Those quotes are going to have a certain dollar value associated with them. I have a closing rate percentage of about roughly 85 to 87% on most sales. So then I can back calculate that number, right? If I go and do 500 grand worth of quoting, I can expect 80% of that to come in. So, and it's the same exact thing in real estate. If I go and make X number of calls, X number of appointments, I can expect reasonably X number of contracts to come in. So, and then tracking that on a daily basis to make sure that those numbers remain accurate and remain consistent is a massive piece of it, because that's what's going to flag you like, oh, okay, so we made the same number of calls, but we didn't seem to get, as many vetted leads. So what's going on there? Is that a lead source issue? Is that a seasonal issue? Because we've seen things drop off with holidays. I mean, stuff like that, when you run the numbers and you have that, that data to analyze, it allows you to have such a deeper, more focused, defined look into what's happening within the organization. And then it allows you to catch it at that point and get back on track. So I love this topic. I love numbers.
Yeah.
It's just good stuff.
Nerd alert. I like it.
Well, and I think Jacob brings up a really good point. We know, for example, holidays, no matter what holiday it is, I mean, it's been Halloween, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, all the other kind of big ones that 4th of July, everything like that, you see a drop in calls. And this is something we talked about maybe 2 weeks ago in our weekly meeting, and we were talking about something else, and I was like, well, and 4th of July is coming up and it's on a weekend, so we're going to see a decrease in calls that both of those weeks. So this week that we just had and the week coming up, because people are going to, well, normally people would be going out of town and things like that. And so Cam got kind of sad. He was like, oh, you're right. And there wasn't disputing it, because we just know we have that data over the last 2.5 years to prove that. But he was just kind of sad that calls are going to drop. And
they have. It's the proof is in the pudding, man. The data comes through. It doesn't matter what I feel that it might not happen. It happens.
I remember you talking. You're like, I'm gonna prove that wrong. We're like, okay, let's see it.
I can still make all the calls, but I'm not getting a hold of as many people.
I thought it was funny though, because it's all like, no, Cam, you can't fix calls don't come in. You can fix them going out.
Yeah.
But data. Yeah.
I think that was me. I was like, prove the data wrong, Cam. Like, go for it.
Yep. Right.
But back to what Jacob was saying too about everyone has a number. That's something that I wanted to find personally for me, because I don't have a number. For those of you that don't know, I do all of the data pulling. So I mean, there are like maybe 100 to 150 numbers that I pull weekly, monthly, quarterly to get everything together so that it'll crunch into those KPIs, key performance indicators. But I don't know what my number is. And so that's something I really want to look at over the next couple of months to figure out what is my one number. Because I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of things. So I don't know. Do I need that one number for each role as like a closing coordinator, as the marketing person, as whatever it is? I don't know.
I think to answer that from the closing coordinator standpoint / pulling the numbers, you do have a weekly number, and your I guess you would say number would be, you've got 4 things that you pull every single week, right? So it's for the huddle call that you and I have on Monday, and then making sure the numbers are straight for the huddle call that the company has on Wednesday. So, and I know that just based on what you've talked about, and it's the return mail. It's knowing how many calls came in and went out, and then how much money we spent on ads, everything for the week. And then what are the call numbers that acquisitions did or did not hit? Those
are numbers that I pull. But what is my number?
Meaning,
what am I doing? Like Jacob has to hit 75 points.
Yeah.
But I don't have a number. I pull everyone else's and analyze that. You see what I'm saying there?
maybe there's not a specific, I know Jacob brings this up, but because it's a different role, maybe there's not a set number that you're hitting, but maybe a set amount of goals that you're reaching, which is like, I have to do these 4 things, which are the same 4 numbers every week. I have to do these same 4 goals that ultimately pull the data. Maybe that's what it is, but I see where you're going. I see where it would be interesting to see what you come out of it. But from what I see as a business owner going to you, and what I think the guys at the company see, is that every Monday and every Wednesday, we are able to go over those numbers because you pull them and it's done every single week. So I don't know if there's specifically a number per se, but that would be interesting if that was something that role would cause to actually have a number.
I see one to answer closing coordinator role. The number in my head is 2. And that's because once we lock up a contract, Ashley, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? But it's usually within 2 days, you email the seller to let him know that you're a closing coordinator, and you start getting title checked. So to me, for closing coordinator, the number is 2 because it's within 2 days of getting a contract signed. You're immediately following up with the seller, starting title, and getting in touch with the attorney's office, and then you're rolling with it. So, and everything thereafter just follows. So if I had to throw a number off it just over conversation right now, based on what we know, that's what I would say.
I think that's a really
specific to
interesting
closing
point.
coordinator. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because that number right there drives everything that we want, right? We want to be able to we want to be able to communicate effectively on the back end as the closing coordinator. And I think how you do that is you do it within a specific time frame of reaching out to the seller and reaching out to the attorney's office within a specific, just within a specific time frame to start that process. So closing coordinator role to me is 2, and it's 2 days. So because if you do everything within 2 days and you keep that process churning, then the line of communication starts there, and it's just going to continue to grow. So now the interesting thing with you is that you do wear so many different hats that it isn't just one number for you. I have no idea how many numbers you would actually have, but that's because you do so many different roles within the company. So, but I think it just goes back to like what he was saying is that everybody, like each individual role should have a number associated with it. So, I mean, it's a little different for you based on the number of hats that you wear, but I think it still falls back to that foundational number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like
All
that
right.
idea. But Cam is right. We are squirreling out a little bit. So.
All right, let's move to the next one. And I think this is a smaller one, and we kind of spoke to it a little bit earlier prior to recording. But issues are obstacles that must be faced to execute your vision. Just as individual success is directly proportionate to his or her ability to solve any issues that arise, the same holds true for a company. So I don't want to really go too far down this or have a bunch of different discussions. I think it's more important for the next few. But I say, as a business owner, issues are brought up because of every week huddle call. So you can address them as your meetings go through, right? So there's the huddle call that we do, and this book talks about that, but a weekly call with your team, what's going on, what performance numbers or your KPIs that you're looking at, and then what are issues that you're addressing. So I think in this issues, I'm going to make it super, I feel like simple and sweet, but issues are things that, yes, they're obstacles, but they're not fires. There's things that just have to be addressed, and then you move forward. So again, that's back to data, not drama, which is, okay, does this conversation need to go, again, squirrel out, like go so far down the rabbit hole, or is it, can we address it, move forward, and not keep talking about it? That's where I feel as though the issues line here comes in play. And I guess, can everybody agree to that? Does that resonate with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would also say that as you face the issues, I mean, it's important to not put a blind eye to them, right? It's important to recognize an issue and figure out a solution. And I feel like we do that really great as a company, right? And me coming from a military background before this, issues were like, ooh, who messed up? And it's not like that in the company at all. And I think as an entrepreneur, it can't be like that. All right, it's an issue. Okay, great. How did we get there? What's the root cause? How do we fix it? How do we move forward? It's not placing blame, so I think that's a really key point about issues in you have to think about it in a positive construct, you know what I mean, instead of a negative construct. That's what I would say.
Cool.
That's a really good point, because sorry, I know it's normally Jacob's turn, but I just want to play off of that, because I throughout the whole book was like, issues just sounds really negative.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it is, especially because of the way we approach it. We try to be very transparent with each other and how we're running the business, and we'll call each other out, and we'll call ourselves out and be like, yeah, I screwed up. I did not get that done, or I totally forgot I was supposed to do that. And I think it took me a long time to get over the word issues, because I don't feel like what we bring up is necessarily issues in that sense. And I know a lot of it is just connotation and words, but yeah, that took me a little while to get over.
There is no pointing fingers. There's a problem, we address it, and we move forward. Right. There, like Cam said, there's, military things like pointing fingers. Like, I don't give a shit who did it, how did it. Like, it got screwed up. Great. Let's fix it, move forward. And then how do we not have that issue again so that we don't arise? Like, why are we repeating the same thing if we addressed it? It shouldn't be an issue anymore. Right. Jacob, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing I just want to key in on based on what you just said, right? So how do we make sure that we address it so that it doesn't happen again? I want to clarify that does not always involve creating a new process. It's very important in that I think that you just said it yourself, Ashley, and we all do this, but we're all accountable and we're all responsible in our positions. Sometimes it really is just as simple as, I didn't get it done. I know I should have. It's not really a problem, but it did happen, right? So you don't always have to put a new system or a new process in place, but you have to make sure that you have the accountability so that people can actually say that and bring it up. I say that because I've had experience in several of my previous careers where literally, like, we've beat the horse to death. And it's just process after process after process. And what happens is you create so much red tape by going down that line that nobody can actually function and get anything done that needs to happen. So I think it's really good to clarify that and to make sure that you avoid that, and just make sure that you're being honest about the issue and that your whole team is being honest with themselves and everybody involved. So just one thing based on what you said there, because I think that that's a very significant key issue that could potentially rise.
Awesome. All right, next.
Into processes.
Yeah, totally. And super easy to roll into processes. And that's what the next one is. Your processes are your way of doing business. Successful organizations see their way clearly and consistently refine it. Due to the lack of knowledge, the secret ingredient in business and the most neglected of 6 key components, most entrepreneurs don't understand how powerful having a process can be. But when you apply it correctly, it works like magic, resulting in simplicity, scalability, and profitability. You will never get your company to the next level keeping your processes in your head and winging it as you go. So this is constantly talked about in our company all the time, which is SOP, standard operating procedure, right? So you understand it, you build it, and then you record it and you do it, right? Because then what happens is now that process is now done. You can do it. You can learn how to do it successfully, and then delegate that to a person, which is now recorded, right? And then that person can rinse and repeat the process. The hardest part about when I got from where I was to where I am was getting everything out of my head. There's a lot of shit rattling around up there, man. And it's crazy, but when you get it out of your head and into a process, not only is it out and visually see it, it can be improved, right? So when you pass it off to either you talk to Ashley with coordinating, closings, paperwork, contracts, to acquisitions and how you normally do it, and pulling comps to dispositions and pulling cash buyers, like all this stuff to be done in a recorded process just makes life simpler. Right. And again, having that SOP is more defined and has to be done in order so you don't, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, looking for a different result, right? Like, that's insane to keep doing that and think it's going to work. So I really like the process. If anything, it's taught me to get everything out of my head, what I know, what I've done, and maybe it's not even being done correctly. But the person that you pass it off to can now take that fundamental process and grow it, right? So that's where I feel as a business owner, I've seen, and where we as a company have succeeded. So how do you feel about that, Cam?
Yeah, definitely. And 2 years ago when I started, into this wholesaling realm, I didn't systematize anything. I couldn't wrap my head around what that was, even after reading this book, because I don't think this book really absorbed with me the first time I read it. But now, as we go through a process, learn a process, and then document it, right? And maybe that's a recorded video, maybe that's a written Google sheet or a Google Doc or whatever, or maybe it's, both, right? And then you go through it, and especially if it's a weekly process or whatever it is, right? You systematize it so that you can hand it off to somebody else. And that's gold, because I think that I was really trying to remember how to do everything every time that I did before, and missing things, right? And then you start writing it down and you start learning from it, and then you hand it off to somebody else, and then you move out of your own way by pushing that off the plate, right? And doing something that's where your time is better spent. And you need systems to do that. And plus, if you don't systematize those things, you're going to miss things. Like you kind of mentioned, Shawn, you're going to screw something up around the way. And maybe that's an important piece that you're screwing up. Maybe it's a minute piece, but either way, you systematize it and go by it every time, there's no screwing up.
Cool. Jacob?
Yeah, so process component, I think, is critical to allowing and training, people that are ultimately that you're going to bring up in the company and starting them off on the right foot. So one thing I would like to say is that I think it's important to understand that no process is ever going to be perfect. So because you can get really held up, and you can really go down the rabbit hole if you really wanted to overanalyze a process, and sometimes it's just not necessary. So, and sometimes it's not always necessary to change a process either, especially if you have somebody who's new, who's coming into the organization, hasn't really had a lot of time to figure out what that role looks like and trying to understand the various components that go into it. Like acquisitions is a prime example, because in our Podio workspace, we have specific categories, items set up that we enter data into, and that's what ultimately allows us to track the lead and make sure that we have everything that needs to go to disposition so that they can do their particular portion, right? Well, throughout the process, I remember when I first started in the company, I was asking Ashley to change things, I think somewhat regularly. And finally one day she kind of came back to me and she was like, no, I don't agree with that. No, I don't think that needs to happen. And it's tough, because it was one of those things where I was like, well, I do think it needs to happen. But it really didn't, right? It was just one of those things where I was getting hung up on it because I hadn't had enough time of doing that process and fully understanding the role to have that realization. So I think it's important to kind of understand, I think you need to give yourself time when you're new to a process to get used to what is currently in place. And then after you've done it for let's call it like a 90-day window, after you've done it for at least 90 days, and then you really think from that point that you have something that needs to be changed, then I would say consider changing it. But it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be evolving. And it's important to understand that when you're creating your videos, when you're creating the SOPs, those don't necessarily have to be perfect either, because the person that you bring up that comes into that role is going to think differently than you do. They're not going to work the same, and they may have different ideas, and they're probably going to end up making changes to the process that you initially put in place, and you have to be okay with that. So being comfortable, making sure that you are giving yourself the opportunity to understand what's currently in place before making changes, I think is key. But then ultimately understanding at the end of the day that it is okay to make changes, and you should not be scared of change. I think that those are two very, very critical things to understand when it comes to process flow. So that's the big thing that I would harp on there. Extremely important to have those things written down, of course.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. A little bit about our company. Jacob and Cam are the fifth and sixth person, respectively, that we've brought into an acquisitions role since I started working with Shawn. And let me tell you, the first time we did it, we brought on 4 new people kind of all at once. And it was rough. we didn't have any of this stuff in place. And part of it was we had someone else working acquisitions with Shawn before I had even come on, and they went their separate ways. And so Shawn hadn't been in that acquisition sphere for a little while, and really having to, and I'd never done it. So having to go back and really iron out what that looked like was hard. And even when we brought Jacob on, who came on in that sort of second wave on his own, I felt like it was so much easier, A, because there was only one person, but B, because we had already started to iron out some of those systems and processes. And then I feel like when we brought Cam on, it was so much more smooth. And maybe Cam didn't feel that way, but to me, it felt like I didn't have to spend as much time going over things because I had videos, I had written lists, and it wasn't always the most organized or the most perfect, but they were there. And then I was there to answer questions and supplement. And even with dispositions, because we had set that up kind of at the same time as we were doing acquisitions, at least we had the basic outline there so that Cam could look through that. And then from there, we've developed and changed things even in the last 6 weeks. But yeah, it is so important. It is a lifesaver because I try to even keep my processes and systems up to date because I do a lot of the background work. And if I were to get into a car accident or something bad happened, the company would come to a standstill for a little bit while everyone had to go through what I normally do on a day, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. So I try to keep that up to date so that if something should happen, which hopefully it won't, the company may stop for like a day or two while they try to iron that out, but it should be organized enough that it'll keep moving forward beyond that.
Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. This is a massive piece that anybody listening to this is you need to have these put together. Even if they're not perfect, they're somewhere, right? They are in a Google Drive, they're in a Word doc, they're in a flow chart, something that says how things go in the start, the middle, and the finish looks like, right? And Ashley spoke to something really, really key there. You know, if she were to have something that would keep her from doing what she does, the company would come to a standstill, which is true because she does a lot of things. But we could go in there and figure it out because it's going back to the systems and processes. So it's a massive piece, right? There's all of this has to be coordinated. And it didn't start like just here you go. It's all perfect and this little bow and roses, right? No way. And it never will be. So where your company will be today where it shouldn't be in the next 96 months to a year. It should always be growing. It should always be evolving, right? I always talk about in our company, we're going to break shit and we're going to fix it and make it better. So be okay with that as the owner and be okay with that as an operator to where your specific process and standard operating procedure will change. And that's okay, right? Huge piece, guys. All right. So the final one, this is traction. In the end, the most successful business leaders are the ones with traction. They execute well and they know how to bring focus, accountability, discipline to their organization. Due to fear and lack of discipline, the traction component is typically most organizations' weakest link. The inability to make a business vision a reality is epidemic. If anything, that is huge takeaway. Like for the final piece of this that we're talking about is all of this equates to actually getting, like the book says, traction, right? But you have to implement these pieces. You have to go over it, right? You have to have your vision. You have to have people, I say the right ass in the right seat. You've got to be collecting data and looking at it and then addressing issues as they approach. But again, like Cam said, you're not pointing fingers. You're just trying to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it and not let it happen again. Having a standard operating procedure for every piece of your business, ultimately to get back to having traction, which is making money, having a simple, or not a simple operation, but a operation that is truly like successful, right? To where every single person in the piece of that knows what's going on. And here's another piece that I'm going to share with anybody that's listening to this. And our company, everybody here will back this up. We're glass. We're transparent, right? We do not hold back anything from anybody in the company. There is no reason to, right? If you're not comfortable with that, then that's an internal issue with you as the owner of the company, or an internal issue with you as the person that's operating in that line, or that wherever you're at in the operation. You should be completely fine with being transparent with everybody on your team. If you're not, you need to have a reality check with yourself and talk and figure it out and like get it on board, because that goes back to what we'll talk about in the book, which is core values. And that's a massive piece to this whole thing of how you get the people in the seat, where does the core values of the company resonate with the people that are on your team? I can tell you right now, if I had these core values before that I'm very hard on and that resonate through our company, I probably wouldn't have had the acquisitions guy that I had, right? Like, I don't think it was embodied. Everybody that's come on with since then, they all agree to it, they all embody it, and they all day-to-day operate by it. Do you guys feel like that's real?
100%.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of realized maybe we glossed over the core values part, right? But everybody within the company operates off that. And I mean, kind of don't want to jump too far back, but when we talk about vision, right? You have to decide what your core values are and who you want to work with and who you want to be around, who you want to do business with, right? And somebody might have all the money in the world, man, but if they don't have the same core values as you, forget about it. It's not going to work out. So, yeah, I'm glad you kind of went back to that. That's a good point.
When we constantly reference them in our day-to-day activities, I mean, one of the ones that we hear, I think, most often is value creates opportunity, right? And that's a core value of ours. And that's the idea that if you create something of value to the company that's going to help the company grow and ultimately improve and get better, like, then you should be rewarded for that to a certain extent, right? So it's empowering just to know that, to be a part of a company that shares that mentality and so on, and then ultimately hiring people on that share that same value. And, you know, it's the same thing with all of them across the board, of course, but I mean, we talk about these things just on a daily basis because it's real. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I kind of think traction that was our biggest, like the book says, literally our biggest issue over the past few years. I feel like, you know, like I said, toward the end of 2018, we had that sort of staff shakeup, and that really changed things within our company. And 2019 was a growing year, and it was putting all of these processes in place, the right people in the right seats, and moving forward. And I think the results of 2020, like we talked about earlier in this recording or in a different podcast, depending on how I cut it up, really speak for themselves. And just going over that again is that, you know, our goal has been to make $500,000 gross in a year. And this year we are at the halfway mark of the year, and we're at 243,000. So a little bit less than half of that $500,000 goal. But I mean, I think we can make it up, especially because we had 6 weeks when COVID first shut down the entire country, where things weren't closing. And so I think we can make that up in the second half of the year, especially because part of doing business is being flexible, and that really forced us to pivot. And I feel like we handled that pivot really well. And so looking ahead, I'm pretty certain there's going to be another shutdown of some kind. And we know how to handle that now, because the first time it was like, oh my God, what are we doing? There was a little bit of scrambling. But if it happens again, then our business model is in place, and we can keep going just as we have been.
I agree. So one of the things I want to talk about is, for people that are listening to the recording, and everybody in our company knows it, but speaking to our core values, there is 6 of them. And the first one that we have is committed to family. And that should resonate. For us as a company, like, and everybody here can talk about it, they've had a moment of it, right? Hey, you know, something happened with the daughter, the dog, the family, the sister, the brother, the mom, the grandmother, like all that's happened. And the first thing, no matter what comes across on the Google Hangouts, go, we got it, right? Handle what you need to handle. We'll take care of it. Everything's good, but take care of family first. That's a massive piece for us as a company. The next one is to have fun. I mean, if you heard this shit on this podcast, you've already, or listened to this recording, like we're here having fun, right? It's because that's what we want to do. We don't get this time back, right? So make it enjoyable inside of your company, right? Like have some fun. This isn't time you can get back. Why do you want to wake up in the morning and go to a place that you just hate, right? Like, why do you want to do any of this stuff? So make it to where you're having fun. That's another one of ours. Another one that Jacob brought up that we speak to constantly is value creates opportunity, or value equals opportunity. If you create something valuable in the company and it does create the opportunity, which normally is a monetary value, then that should be a reward, right? And huge things like this have come across. I mean, Jacob was one that developed one of our the inspection app for our company. Like, that was awesome. Like, why don't you marry this? And then him and Ashley came together and put it together and made it happen, right? So the idea and then the finishing piece and then all together, and it works. Okay. So that's a really, really huge piece for our company, right? And since then we've built that and made it a process to where we can sell it and people pay for it. So it's something that's valuable, right? The other one is just doing the right thing. That is, I don't even know how that would go back to anybody but a core value of their person, but like, just do the right thing. If you feel like you're doing something wrong and your gut tells you like, I don't know, man, it just feels wrong. It probably is, right? So if that is a core value in your company or a person, then you're normally going to do the right thing. And if you don't, check yourself. Like, that means like, maybe I should go back and think about that piece. That's a huge one. Encourage creativity and the ability. That is a massive one. I always say this is because the creativity part is, and Ashley and I speak this a lot, because I feel like visionary as me as the owner want to be creative, or Ashley's thinking about things that can be built, or Jacob's thinking things, or Cam's thinking things of like what makes things better, right? Ultimately to come to the ability of finishing it, doing it, and using it. That is another massive piece. And the final one that I've always loved and I've always just had in my brain since day one, and it's just always been part of my core, is you're a hustler, man. You hustle. You get shit done, right? It doesn't matter where, how, when. We are going to get it done. And there has been times in this company that now and in the past where it's all like, oh man, we got to get shit done, right? And it happens. Right. So every person that is in this company right now embodies all of these core values every single day. And that's another piece of this, is to where you as an operator and owner should have these yourself and create it, and then have this to where you resonate throughout the company. Right. Because it's real. Everybody's on board. Everybody agrees. That means that everybody's doing it. If somebody is not, if someone coming to your organization and everybody else doesn't jive, like there's nobody on this recording, much less our company, that hasn't said, hey, we want to bring on such and such. What do you think? And those people all had the meeting and said, yes, I think it would work. Yes, I like that person. Yes, I would want to work with that person. Right? Every single person that's here has done that and has felt that. Right? And that's what I look forward to. And I look forward to building the company and building people and bringing on new guys and women and all that kind of stuff. So what do you think we're at here as far as time? And I know you can chop on this stuff, but.
Well, I was just thinking maybe we should pause the recording and take a break, because we got through chapter 1.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, let's maybe take a break, and chapter 1's kind of the meatiest, and then we can go do the other ones a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Because I think we went through all of these steps this time, whereas for each other chapter, it's going to be more like what are your thoughts on this chapter sort of thing. Yep. So let's take a break. Everyone get water, coffee, use the bathroom, come back in 5 minutes.
Cool. Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome.